you know how kids are always monkeying around on the web now. It's become, the domain not just of adults, but even little kids are messing around on the web. And they keep track of their little passwords. I have a notebook because I have so many passwords, and, I just have a notebook by my computer. But sometimes kids will get those Post-it notes, and they'll just put them all over the place. Well, I happened to notice a Disney password at my house that was Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Pluto. And I said, how come this is so long? And Rosie said, well, they say it has to have at least 4 characters. It's clean. Oh, shoot. I don't know about you, but, we have lots of stories to tell in our house, and one of them is the getting up late in the morning. That is like one of my least favorite stories to tell, but it's true. And this is a story about Bob, who had a problem about getting up late in the morning and was always late for work. And finally, after a few weeks, his boss got angry with him and threatened to fire him if he didn't do something about it. So Bob went to the doctor, and he got some pills, and the doctor told him to take the pill before he went to bed. And so he did, got a great night's sleep, beat the alarm in the morning, had a great leisurely breakfast, was kind of feeling on top of the world, cheerfully drove to work, walked in. Boss, he said, the pill my doctor prescribed actually worked. And his boss said, well, that's all good, Bob, but where were you yesterday? It wouldn't be church without a story, would it? One of the gifts that God has given us as human beings is the gift to see beyond the obvious, to see beyond the concrete, and to think in the abstract, to maybe expect a certain outcome to a story and then be flexible enough to be surprised. I once had a golden retriever by the name of Yoda. He was a genius dog. He was one of my best spiritual teachers, but he was a dog for sure. And on one early morning run many years ago, I can remember we were out and Yoda saw a cat in front of a neighbor's garage door. So of course he chased it, but the garage door was open just enough for a cat and not enough for a golden retriever. So the cat got through, but of course Yoda did not. He was stopped. Nonetheless, the next time we went running through that same neighborhood, Yoda went up to the garage door and tried to get into there was no cat there, but he tried to get in under that crack because, that's what he learned. And there was no game for him that day. But the next time we went into that neighborhood, he did the very same thing. And the next time and the next time, poor Yoda was kind of stuck on that garage and that cat. His wiring was dog wiring, not human wiring. And sometimes I'm like that, right? I kind of get stuck on a theme or stuck on an idea or stuck. I have one encounter with somebody that's meaningful, and I expect that the next encounter will be just as meaningful. And that the depth that we reached in that encounter will be maintained the next time I see them. They'll look at me and say, oh, I remember that great conversation we had. It was so meaningful and so deep for me, But like life, it doesn't always happen like that. It doesn't always happen like that. Because people start over sometimes when the day begins. And people with dementia really show us that, don't they? People with dementia teach us to start over every time, to start anew, to be fresh every day. This past week I went to the home of a woman in her 90s. She has some dementia. She's losing her eyesight and her hearing, and she's not very happy about that. But she has this sense of dignity that she works very hard to maintain, and I just love that. You just got to love that in a person. So anyone who reminds her that it's not all good is pretty much banished from her home. She has no use for them. Sometimes having hospice just in her sight is enough to set her off a little bit, remind her of her mortality. So I walked in and I said, good morning. And she looked up at me from where she was reading her newspaper in her easy chair and put her head back in her newspaper without saying anything. And I just thought, okay, breathe, I'll just stand here for a moment. She said, see that chair, sit down. yes, ma'am. So I sat down in the chair, and I breathed again, just kind of waited for what was going to come next. She said, so you're right. I don't like people interrupting me when I'm reading the paper. Okay. And then I said, I don't need to stay today if you're busy. And I took another breath, and she said, fine then, goodbye. So I said, God bless you, and walked out kind of, no, I wasn't timid. I had that kind of thing happen before. I walked out the door, said, God bless you, and she said, thank you. And that was the end of our encounter. That was my visit for the day, and I wondered what was good about that. What was good about that? There's this saying, it's all good, right? When going through the one-year residency about being a certified chaplain, one form of training and reflection that we all needed to go through was the process of creating verbatims, like frequently. A verbatim is like a recounting of your exchange with another person. So it's about writing down every word as best you can tell. Every word of the conversation, how you felt when they said that, what you thought of when you said that, what the room was like, whether you feel dizzy or scared or whatever experience you're having, that's what you write about. And it's very in-depth, and for people who don't do that sort of thing, it's kind of like, really do you have to get into it that deeply? So I had these afterthoughts because I've been trained to do that. Afterthoughts with this woman, I thought, what was the purpose of that exchange, and was it fulfilled? I forgot to mention that after I walked out the door, the garage door was open, and there weren't any cats in there. No, it wasn't about, that's not that story. That's a different story. But the garage door was open, and there was a family member in there. And so I said, well, that wasn't a long interview, and the family member came out, and we spent 20 minutes outside talking. Okay, we talked about how the patient's process is affecting everybody in that family, how people are suffering, how they're feeling a little bit abused by that 90-something-year-old. But this family member was coping and finding ways to laugh, and in the midst of these struggles that the patient was working through. So maybe I got kicked out of the house so I would have the conversation with a family member. You just never know, right? When you open up the scope, you really never know, why is this happening the way it is?